morning sun shines on the gleaming hide of a muscular ranch horse. The aroma of bacon and coffee drifts from the wood cook stove at a cow camp. Silver spurs jingle as the men and women of the West get set for another day in the saddle. From the heart of Canada's finest ranching country, this is the Spirit of the West with rancher and horse trainer Hugh McLennan and his collection of music, poetry, and conversations with the folks who live and work with horses and cattle in the Spirit of the West.
Well, I guess it's a sign of my age, but it's still disappointing when I talk with folks somewhat younger than me and they say they have never heard of Roy Rogers, the king of the cowboys, a hero to hundreds of thousands of folks, and of course, Roy Rogers and Dale Evans were wonderful role models for generations of kids like me. Roy and Dale's daughter, Cheryl Rogers Barnett, has been on this show a few times, and when I found out about her latest project to try and preserve the memories of Roy and Dale, I gave her a call, and she was happy to join the show today. And as the great horseman and lifelong friend of Roy and Dale's, Rusty Richards, says, you can't talk about Roy without mentioning Trigger.
He was the prettiest. He was almost pure thoroughbred, and he would stretch out, and he looked so gorgeous on the screen. Wow, he was a beautiful animal.
Baxter Black checks in with his method for dealing with a pretty common pest around a barnyard or feedlot.
At night, they roosted in my hay barn, on top of the gates, at the water tanks, by the hundreds, all painting my facilities the color of a bat cave.
A cowboy from Fossil, Oregon is in the Cowboy Poetry Spotlight this week.
A lot of people wanted to be cowboys when they grew up, and the old Saturday matinee movies had a lot to do with it.
The Rangeland News takes us through some promising new developments in technology and a look at safety on the ranch.
The leading cause of death in younger farm kids, tractors.
On the Urban Saddles and Western Wear Horse Training file, the subject is horses that spook. Can we prevent it? And if we can't, how do we deal with it? And we'll go back to 1937 for this week's classic Song of the West, one that was recorded but never released until about 2000. And this guy wrote the first song I put on our Creak of the Leather CD a while back, a great entertainer, fantastic guitar player, and he's in the process of recovering from a pretty big stroke. Bill Barwick sets the stage for my guest, Cheryl Rogers Barnett.
I paid my dime, took my seat, watched him right across the silver screen, catching the bad guys, saving the town. Life was a whole lot better when Roy Rogers was around. Lord, it was a different time back then. Life was good and men were men. Never had no worries, never saw a frown. Life was a whole lot better when Roy Rogers was around. Roy never gave up, he never gave in, never backed down, he'd always win. Never compromised with the bad guys, nobody pushed him around. Life was a whole lot better when Roy Rogers was around. Now life was a whole lot sweeter then. Skies seemed bluer and the grass was greener. Nothing bad ever lasted long, nothing much got you down. Life was a whole lot better when Roy Rogers was around. Now I still see Roy riding in my dreams. Trigger and Dale still look the same. Got me through some hard times, saw me safe and sound. Life was a whole lot better when Roy Rogers was around. Roy never gave up, he never gave in, never backed down, he'd always win. Never compromised with the bad guys, nobody pushed him around. Life was a whole lot better. Life was a whole lot better. Life was a whole lot better when Roy Rogers was around.
Bill Barwick. Well, Roy and Dale's daughter Cheryl's on the line today, and it's great to visit again, Cheryl, and that song, boy, it just takes me back.
And watching Roy and Trigger, and the theater would be full of kids just like me, and oh my goodness, Roy would be in a fight. The bad guy jumped him from behind, and the bad guy was throwing punches, and Roy was reeling, and then all of a sudden, he would just come on, and he'd throw a hard right, and the bad guy would go back, and we'd cheer. I mean, the whole theater would just be cheering.
It's the villain.
Yeah.
It's one of those things where I've written a little bit about Roy Barcroft in there, because I just adored him. He was just the greatest guy. But he would come on the screen, and every kid in the theater would start hissing and booing because, I mean, poor sap of a hero. It took Dad an hour to figure out that Roy Barcroft was the bad guy.
Oh, but you know what a perfect villain! I mean, he was a wonderful actor, and my gosh, he could just play that role of the crooked banker, or whoever it was, you know. And your dad whipped him so many times, and Gene whipped him, and Rex whipped him, the poor guy.
Oh, everybody.
Yeah.
But you know, he gave several interviews where he said that he had patterned himself off the great prior villain Harry Wood, and Harry was big and hulking, and he had that black mustache, and he never raised his voice. And he was in a couple of Dad's first movies as the bad guy. But Roy was the same. He had that beautiful, soft voice, and it tickled me years later meeting Morgan Woodward, because Morgan did the same thing. He was so menacing without ever raising his voice. And I thought that was, you know, that's a good way for the bad guys to be.
It is just so important for the up-and-coming generation to still remember the heroes and what a huge, huge influence that they had on our outlook, on our moral values, and on our ethics and everything else. I mean, the entertainment was fantastic, but that message still came through.
Well, it's really too bad that our Western heritage isn't taught in schools anymore. When I was in school, they taught it through music, they taught it through dance, because we learned to square dance and do the Virginia reel and stuff like that, which the settlers did as they were coming across the country. Of course, they brought it from Europe originally. And we just don't do that anymore. So I'm hoping that as the young people find our website, and as they ask us questions, because we really want them to ask questions, that we can go back in our family history or whatever and try and find the answers for them. And we really want to put it more on a personal thing, not as much the story of the movie, because you get that as you watch the movie. What we want to do is more bring that history alive and talk about our family members and about our friends. I think through interaction you bring people more into the website, and that's what we're hoping to do with this.
Well, I want to talk more about this great new website that you're doing, Cheryl, and also I can't wait to talk about your dad's special relationship with Trigger when the Spirit of the West continues right after this. Welcome back to the Spirit of the West. Cheryl Rogers Barnett's on the line today, daughter of Roy and Dale, and we're talking about her new website where a lot of classic old Western movies of her dad's and many others are available now for viewing. But Cheryl, I got to tell you that I've been a lifelong horseman, observed horses and riders, ridden all my life, and there is no question when you see Roy and Trigger, there was some real harmony between them, and man, could your dad ever ride.
Well, Dad was a great athlete. It always amazed me. When we moved out to Encino, the house that we bought, and that was in 1950, the house that we bought had a tennis court. I don't know that Dad had ever played tennis before, but, I mean, you would have thought that he had taken lessons from the top pros. I mean, he was so fluid, and I think in fact, listening to my husband, who was an athlete in high school and college, a lot of it had to do with Dad's peripheral vision. He had incredible eyesight. His far vision was just incredible, and great reflexes. So he could take up just about any sport and beat anybody that wasn't a pro at that sport. So that's a real gift, and that's how he was on Trigger. But he said, too, you know, when he and the old man met, because old Trigger was a rental horse, and they met at the studio, Dad said from the moment he threw his leg over him, he just felt one with that horse. And that continued on with Little Trigger that did all the tricks and stuff. I mean, Dad was a great rider.
Well,
and it was something natural because he'd never had a lesson. And as a kid, he didn't have a good horse. He rode a plow horse.
And bareback with no saddle.
Yeah, no saddle.
Well, even in the, nobody thought when they were editing these original movies that we would be watching them in freeze framing and going back and watching in slow motion to see when the scene was cut and when the double came in. You can kind of see some of that now, and I've watched very closely, and on some scenes where Roy is on Trigger, galloping full out, he takes down his rope and he builds a loop and he's swinging his rope at a full gallop, and you can tell that is not a stunt double. That's Roy doing that,
Yeah, he was really good, although I must say, Joe Yergoen, stunt double, and then later Bill Ketching. I mean, they were both really good. Now, with Joe, I can tell the difference because Joe was a little smaller and much stockier than Dad was. With Bill Ketching, they were about the same size and build, and I really can't tell Ketching as much. Yeah.
A young man from Ohio by name of Leonard Sly had formed a lonesome cowboy band in 1935. Then Leonard hit the movies and learned to rope and ride. The legend of Roy Rogers became the nation's pride. Cowboys always need a horse, a special type of friend. And Roy knew that the studios had horses they could lend. But when he met that stallion, a special bond was formed, a friendship lasting 30 years upon the saddle horn. All the world remembers that movie matinee, the silver screen that gave our lives a meaning and a way. So many hearts were broken in July of '65. The world lost something wonderful the day that Trigger died. Together they would wander across the western range. They gave a nation's children hope and values that don't change. He always got the bad guy, 'cause no horse could outrun the legend that was Trigger and Roy's two fists and gun. Now Roy sung songs of tumbleweeds and please don't fence me in. And Trigger's tricks have always had the power to make us grin. They stood so tall with modest pride, this hero and his horse. They taught us all that good can be a strong, attractive force. And all the world remembers that movie matinee, silver screen that gave our lives a meaning and a way. So many hearts were broken in July of '65, and the world lost something wonderful the day that Trigger died. The world lost something wonderful the day that Trigger died.
That's the fine Australian singer Leighton Watts, and a song that he'd talked about writing for a long time and finally did it.
Now, you had said, it seems to me someplace on the site, that your dad loved Trigger, the original Trigger, but he had a kind of some mixed feelings about Little Trigger.
Dad, Dad never even admitted that he existed. To his dying day, he never admitted that Little Trigger existed. And when the little horse died, Dad just dug a big hole and put him in there. And yet he was the one that did almost all of the tricks. In fact, Leo Pando, who did a great book about Trigger, The Illustrated History of Trigger, and he's working on revising that and bringing out a second edition, and I've been working with him quite a bit. He has come up with the most incredible photographs, and he's got a couple of photographs of the big horse sitting down. I had no idea he could do that. I thought only Little Trigger did that. And a couple of other stunts, and I looked at it, and if it wasn't for that incredible head of his and that wonderful 90-degree turn blaze by his lips, I would have sworn it wasn't him. So he was, in the beginning at any rate, a little more versatile than I thought he was. But mainly, as I remember him, his job was to just be beautiful, which he did really well. And, he could rear that gorgeous, straight-up rear that he and Dad did.
Yeah.
And running, he was the prettiest. He was almost pure thoroughbred, and he would stretch out, and he looked so gorgeous on the screen. Wow, he was a beautiful animal.
Yeah, and oh gosh, so many of those scenes, like just before Roy and Bob and Tim and Pat were gonna, there goes the Outlaws, and Roy would be on Trigger, and he would do that beautiful rear, right up on his hind legs, and then turn around and go. And Roy was not holding the horn or anything. It was just so coordinated. It was pretty neat. But I loved watching Little Trigger's dance routines. There's that one scene in Hollywood Canteen with the Pioneers where he comes in and does that dance to Don't Fence Me In. That is...
Yes.
Yeah.
Well, and he did that later in Don't Fence Me In.
Yeah, and I just watched the uncut version of that one last week and just loved it. Well, we have the original Trigger, Little Trigger, and let's talk some about Trigger Jr. in a little while. But Baxter Black is next, and then some big news about the Sons of the Pioneers, and then the Rangeland news when the Spirit of the West continues right after this.
Howdy, friends. This is Baxter Black on Spirit of the West with Hugh McLennan with a little peek at scarecrows versus scare sheep. What holds the loaded 30,000-pound trailer to the heavy-duty truck? What holds the 38-foot RV trailer to the dually? What holds the 2-horse trailer with your daughter's favorite pony to the half-ton pickup? Well, the odds are it's a B&W trailer hitch, probably a turnover bowl, American-made, employee-owned, customer-tuned, and proud of their part in America's greatness. B&W, holding things together down the road. Sometimes birds can be a nuisance. Blackbirds, pigeons, seagulls, guinea hens, and starlings have always been a problem for feedlots. One particular afternoon, I sent one of the feedlot hens to town to get some replicas of owls. I had read the decoy owls would scare off the birds. Well, the next morning I got a call on the two-way from the boss. He was in a foul mood. Sorry. "What do you think this is, Halloween? Do you think the Audubon Society would approve? Are they waterproof, packing guns? Where did you go to school again?" "Stanford," I lied. Well, I had no idea what he was talking about until I pulled into the feed yard and started down the first alley. Owls were posted on every other pen sign with Scotch tape. Of course, you couldn't tell they were owls from the side. They were cardboard cutouts of cartoon owls, painted black and orange, and many were surrounded by starlings perched on the cable, picking their teeth. Last fall, I was invaded by big black birds. At night, they roosted in my hay barn, on top of the gates at the water tanks by the hundreds, all painting my facilities the color of a bat cave. I tried dogs chained to gates, chicken wire, rap music, even a stuffed deer, until, in my frustration, I sneaked out at daylight with my 20 gauge and dusted one off. I hung him by the ankles over a 12-foot gate in the air. The herds of birds departed and have never, not even once, come back. Well, I've noticed this method doesn't work for all species, although you'd be surprised. I talked to a sheep herder from Idaho that claimed the scarecrow or scare sheep method worked pretty good on his fine wool debolays. He reported that the ewes had located a loose stretch of fence line and had begun crawling under. They'd get onto the road and get run over by traffic. Well, the sheep herder laid a carcass under the bottom wire to act as an example. Well, none crossed at that space. However, they just moved down the fence line about 3 feet and crawled under, only to be hit by a car also. He finally concluded that the scare sheep method did work. It just took more decoy sheep, about a quarter of a mile's worth, piled 3 high, in his experience. This is Baxter Black on Spirit of the West with Hugh McLennan, brought to you by B&W Turnover Bowl.
The legendary Sons of the Pioneers, with an unbroken connection back to the beginning with Roy Rogers, Tim Spencer, and Bob Nolan. Up to the present, their wonderful Western harmonies are still honoring those traditions, and their live show is spectacular. Clear water. The famous Sons of the Pioneers will be in Calvary Community Church in Kamloops, BC, June 28th at 7 p.m. The Kamloops Coast Hotel will have a special room rate for this wonderful show. Their 2017 tour will begin June the 19th in Vancouver and continue east through the Okanagan Valley to the Kootenay region of beautiful BC. The tour wraps up in Kamloops on June 28th.
Drifting along with the tumbling,
More information, go to sonsofthepioneers.org. Tickets available at Kamloops Live Box Office 250-374-5483 or call 306-332-4065.
Just one more time, let's gather round the campfire and share those fond old memories we hold dear. With fiddle and guitar, we'll lift our voices and we'll sing the songs of the sons of the pioneers. And I can still see them rolling along, searching for cool, cool water. Empty saddles are still waiting way out there. And when there's blue shadows on the trail of that last roundup, we'll be singing the songs of the sons of the pioneers. Let's all sing a song
about the cowboy. With those harmonies so sweet and clear, we'll sing about the desert and the prairie. We'll sing the songs of the sons of the pioneers, and I can still see them rolling along, searching for cool, cool water. Empty saddles are still waiting way out there. And when there's blue shadows on the trail of that last roundup, we'll be singing the songs of the sons of the pioneers. We'll be singing the songs of the sons of the pioneers.
Now the news of the rangeland, a roundup of news and coming events from around the West.
Top of page one, farm and ranch kids grow up in a much different environment than city kids, as we know, and they learn to do a lot of things pretty early in life. But there have been some accidents involving youngsters on farms and ranches, and Gary Crawford has this look at the trend and the causes.
Injuries to children and youth on the nation's farms are down by more than half since 2001.
The fatality rate, unfortunately, we haven't seen that type of decline in.
Martha Soswedel, Youth Ag Safety Specialist at the National Children's Center for Rural and Ag Health and Safety in Marshfield, Wisconsin. That group out with a new fact sheet on this, and here's the most alarming fact on there.
About every 3 days, a child dies in an agricultural-related incident.
121 deaths every year. A quarter of those involve machinery, 17% motor vehicles, such as ATVs, 16% drownings. But Soswedel says the leading cause of death in younger farm kids, tractors.
The reason for that is because they are being taken for a ride by a parent, and they're being taken as an extra rider on a tractor.
Among older youth, the major cause of injuries and death?
Youth doing work that is not appropriate for their age level.
Often because parents overestimate their offspring's abilities. You can get some guidelines to help assess what work is appropriate at what age at this site, cultivatesafety.org. Gary Crawford for the U.S. Department of Agriculture, Washington.
Contaminated grass and wildflower seed for conservation and wildlife land has triggered the spread of a fast-growing weed that threatens to strangle crops in America's heartland. The weed, Palmer amaranth, I think, is hard to kill, and if left unchecked, it destroys as much as 91% of corn on infested land, according to the USDA. It's spreading across Iowa, which accounts for nearly a fifth of the U.S. corn production, and in 2016 exported more than $1 billion worth of corn and soy. And the Federal Conservation Reserve Program pays farmers to remove land from production to improve water quality, prevent soil erosion, and protect endangered species. Now, you would think that a 1,200-pound cow would place a lot of pressure on the ground on which she walks, but a new study shows that it does not do much to compact common soils if they're grazed responsibly. The study is unique in its 16-year span, and researchers wanted to know whether grazing cattle on corn stubble left in the field in the fall and spring would significantly affect the quality of the soil. It was established in 1997 at the University of Nebraska. Researchers said they did not see any negative effects of grazing residues on soil properties except for some minor compaction. Compaction increased with grazing as expected, but it was not high enough to reduce the yield. The level of compaction was so small that it did not adversely affect corn or soybean yields. And how about this from the Rangeland News, looking down the trails that lead to the future department? Nigel Gifford, the engineer behind the Facebook-acquired Aquila drone, has developed a new UAV or drone named Pouncer, which is designed to deliver food in disaster zones, and even the drone itself is edible. The drone can carry vacuum-packed foods in its 3-meter-wide hull, and the structure itself is made from consumable baked components. From every sale of Pouncer, 50 lives could be saved, according to Gifford's company Windhorse Aerospace, and they plan to start production late this year. You can keep up with all the sales at the BC Livestock Co-op at their website, bclivestock.bc.ca, and you'll find a listing of the sales of the Innisfail Auction Market at innisfailauctionmarket.com. Oh yeah, and once again, if you're planning on taking in the Sons of the Pioneers concert June the 28th in Kamloops, tickets are available at Kamloops Live Box Office. You can call them at 250-374-5483. And just a heads up, they will be doing a concert in Edmonton and in Red Deer in Alberta in November. And that takes us down to the final item, and you know, sometimes in trying to make a point and get the audience's attention, I'll accidentally mix up some old cliches and metaphors, and the results are interesting. For example, well, you know, it's sure not rocket surgery, or he's not the sharpest egg in the attic, or that's not going to happen. You could keep doing that till the cows freeze over. Or one more. Yeah, he drinks like a chimney and smokes like a fish. And that's the Rangeland News. Coming up on the Irvin Saddles and Western Wear Horse Training File, how do you deal with a horse that spooks a lot? And then Cheryl Rogers Barnett with some stories about Trigger Jr., when the Spirit of the West continues right after this. Welcome back to the Spirit of the West. On the Irvin Saddles and Western Wear Horse Training File, I'll be looking at a horse that spooks and becomes afraid, and some things to help you get through that. And we'll be talking with Cheryl about her dad and Trigger Jr. after this one from the Oklahoma balladeer Les Gillum.
My memories consist of good and bad, but I prefer to think about the good times that we had. Though life was hard and often sometimes mean, we found our joy in living upon the silver screen. There was so little time for any fun. Survival was a constant goal to get the work all done. But now and then we acted out our dream. We went to watch our heroes upon the silver screen. I doubt if Mr. Autry really knew how much he made life bearable. Heroes seldom do. So here's to Roy and Rex and Tex, to Hoppy and to Gene. They brought us joy unspeakable upon the silver screen. And though those days are oh so far away, the memories of yesterday still linger till today. I never will forget just what they mean. When we adored our heroes on the silver screen. I doubt if Mr. Autry really knew how much he made life bearable. Heroes seldom do. So here's to Roy and Rex and Tex, to Hoppy and to Gene. They brought us joy unspeakable upon the silver screen. They brought us joy unspeakable upon the silver screen.
Now it's time for the Horse Training File, brought to you by Irvine Tack and Western Wear, Canada's largest Western store.
At Irvin Tack and Western Wear, you won't find this.
Hey, yo!
But you will find this.
Welcome to Irvin's.
How can I help you?
You won't find this.
What size boots you wear there, boy? You got tiny feet.
But you will find this.
Absolutely, we have your size. In fact, I've got the perfect pair for you right here.
The one and only Irvin Tack and Western Wear, something for everyone. Cowboys and cowgirls to city folks too. It's Western Wear with a welcome twist. Off exit 305 on Highway 2 by Crossfield. Open 7 days a week.
Canada's largest Western store.
Recently, I've heard and seen seemingly endless discussions from riders of all abilities concerning horses that spook. And a lot of these well-meaning folks have offered endless solutions, and sadly, mostly based on something somebody told them rather than a good, solid solution based on experience and savvy. In my observation, the horse that will never spook at anything is a very rare individual. In some cases, I guess they can be so totally desensitized that they've gone into a shutdown mode, but that's not a good thing. I think there are two types of spooking most horses are susceptible to. One is the unexpected, without warning jump or bolt or spin when something suddenly startles the horse. A common situation around here is a grouse rocketing up from almost underneath us. Now, if the horse basically is well broke and understands the basic yields, it's usually not too hard to get control of his feet and then bring his attention back to you. Now, the other kind of spooking is when the horse senses something scary way off in the distance. It often happens when they're ridden in a totally new place for the first time, but it can happen anywhere. The horse stops in his tracks, his head comes up, his eyes are wide, and his ears riveted on what he's trying to see. And often he'll give that loud blowing sound, and you can feel his heart rate coming up and the tension build through his body. And when that happens, you need to get his mind back on you as soon as possible. If he's locked up, what often helps is to use one rein to bring his head around to one side, keep your butt in the saddle, and really try to disengage his hindquarters. If you can do this in both directions and keep his feet moving, it often helps, but not always. Now here's where pride and guilt and all that other stuff can play on a rider's mind. Oh, I better stay on him or he'll think he's won and he'll realize he can get me off his back by pulling this stuff. Well, I know that feeling, but you can't help that horse if you get dumped off and injured. You can help him if you have to step off. You can still disengage his hindquarters from the ground and get his mind back on you. Now, I've got to emphasize that there are no hard and fast rules. Every horse is different, every situation's different, and there are no solutions that are guaranteed to work 100% of the time. The way you read the horse and the timing of your response is just as important as the method you use. And for Irvin Saddles and Western Wear, that's the Horse Training File. Something that sure helps our horses is that daily feeding of Hoffman's Horse Ration, and you can find out more at hoffmanshorseration.com. And now let's get back to Cheryl Rogers Barnett. And we've talked about the original Trigger that we all knew and loved, and some interesting things about Little Trigger, but later on we got to see Trigger Jr., and I believe he was a Tennessee Walker, wasn't he?
He was a registered Tennessee Walker. He was beautiful, but he was really flashy looking because he was a dark palomino that during the winter he'd get quite dappled. And then he had 4 high white stockings and the white mane and tail, which of course Glenn bleached out a little. But he was just super flashy looking. So it's pretty easy to spot him, but he didn't do hardly any movies. He's in Trigger Jr., and I don't know, he might have made one other film, but mainly he, as Little Trigger, got tired because he'd been on the road from the beginning of Dad's career. He's the horse that was trailered all over the country. He flew to London. He took the boat to Hawaii. He was just hauled all over this country and even out of this country. He got tired. His legs got tired. So Dad had Trigger Jr. in the wings, so to speak. Being a gaited horse, being a Tennessee Walker, he loved to dance. And he was a great dancer, like Little Trigger had been. So he really was wonderful for the parades and doing the rodeos and the state fairs, stuff like that.
I think I saw a clip somewhere of, I think it was the Perry Como show, black and white from, I can't even remember what year now. And your mom and dad and Trigger were on the show, and he does a dance routine, and I think to my eye, it looked like Trigger Jr. in that one. I'm not sure, but you sure looked like him, I thought. You just moved a little bit different than little Trigger did, and obviously wasn't old Trigger.
Yeah.
But,
I think by then it was Trigger Jr. by then.
Yeah, it could have been.
He's rode across your silver screen for over 40 years. He's brought bad men to justice. He's seen laughter and he's seen tears. And I know forever in many hearts he'll reign as the king of the cowboys. There is honor to his name. He's a kind and gentle legend, a hero is his fame, showing young folks to see the right from wrong, and he's taught me the very same. And I know forever in many hearts he'll reign as the king of the cowboys. There is magic in his name. He's the king of the cowboys, a legend in his time, a man who loves his country, where he will always ride. Saddled up on his golden Palomino, with a 6-gun by each side, in his boots and spurs and his white hat, rides a man with a lot of pride. And I know forever in many hearts he'll reign as the king of the cowboys. There is honor to his name. King of the cowboy, a legend in his time, a man who loves his country, where he will always ride off into the sunset in a western sky of blue. He has given us precious memories and happy trails for me and you.
That's, of course, Cheryl's younger brother, Dusty, Roy Rogers Jr. And you can find Cheryl's new website simply westernstarstheater.com. And we hope to have her back with us next week. And next, Roy Rogers with the Sons of the Pioneers in this week's classic Song of the West, When the Spirit of the West continues right after this. Welcome back to the Spirit of the West. For this week's classic Song of the West, we're going to go back to a recording session in Los Angeles in 1937. Now, after founding the Sons of the Pioneers with Tim Spencer and Bob Nolan, and then adding Hugh and Carl Farr and Lloyd Perryman, Roy Rogers was at this point being seriously considered as a Western movie star. but he still managed to tour and record with the Pioneers. Now, according to Ken Griffith's terrific book, Hear My Song, the story of the celebrated Sons of the Pioneers, Roy signed a contract with Republic Studios October 13th, 1937, and according to producer Fred Goodwin, he recorded this song with the group on October 28th the same year. And I'm pretty sure Roy wrote this one called the Cowboy Night Herd Song.
On night guard I'm a-riding around 1,000 bedded steers, and tonight my thoughts are sliding down the trail of distant years. Coyotes howling in the darkness chills my weary bones. Varmints prowl around the campfire makes the cowboy feel at home. Hello-dee-o, hello-dee-o, hello-dee-o-dee. Hello-dee-o-dee, hello-dee, hello-dee-o, hello-dee-o, hello-dee-o-dee, hello-dee-o-dee, hello-dee-o-dee. Now the cold north wind is blowing, snow comes falling down. Wrapped in my saddle blanket, sleeping on the cold, cold ground. I used to ponder over my luck, I wondered why it never changed. I was happy and free around my mammy's knee, pulling on her apron strings. Hello-dee-o, hello-dee-o, hello-dee-o-dee. Hello-dee, hello-dee-o-dee. Hello-dee-o, hello-dee-o, hello-dee-o-dee. How I long to see the sun come shining, stealing through my kitchen door, just to see my dear old mammy cooking ham on that old kitchen stove, where the mockingbird sings you to sleep at night, the moonbeams playing through the trees. Some like the climate out in New Mexico, but give me back my sunny Tennessee. Hello-dee-o, hello-dee-o, hello-dee-o-hey. Hello-dee-o-dee, hello-dee-o-dee, hello-dee-o, hello-dee-o, hello-dee-o-dee,
Not bad for a 1937 session, and I'm just listening to that fantastic fiddle from Hugh Farr and rhythm guitar just a swinging there from his brother Carl Farr. And I noticed the bass line too, stand-up bass just trucking right along, and that was played in that session by Bob Nolan. All right, now here's a guy we haven't heard from in quite a while. From Fossil, Oregon, it's John Bowerman in the Cowboy Poetry Spotlight.
Well, a lot of people wanted to be cowboys when they grew up, and the old Saturday matinee movies had a lot to do with it. Remember back in our younger days when we went to the Saturday matinee? Roy Rogers, Lone Ranger, and Lash LaRue, Gene Autry, and a lot of others too. They rode good horses and they all packed guns, but you know, they never killed anyone. When threatened by an outlaw band, they shot the guns from the bad guy's hand. They never ran from a stand-up fight, but they always fought fair and did what was right. They had truth and honor and all the traits that makes a hero really great. And after the Saturday matinee, when us kids went outside to play, we lived by the code and could understand only shoot at the guns in the bad guy's hands. Back when playing cowboys was all in fun, and real heroes never killed anyone.
Well, thank you so much for riding along this week, and I sure hope you can join us right here next week at the same time. And, of course, so many thanks go to our great support crew, Mark and Kathy McMillan. They own and operate a beautiful place called Meadow Springs Guest Ranch, where you can spend some time riding those beautiful trails, and you're welcome to bring your own horses. Billy and I love staying in their log cabin. And if you're looking for tractor parts, any make, any year, Mark can help you there too. Just go to bctractorparts.com. And I'm sure enjoying the latest issue of Canadian Cowboy Country Magazine. You can too. Look for it at your favorite newsstand or subscribe online at cowboycountrymagazine.com or give them a call at 1-800-943-7336 and Kendra will be happy to help you. And be listening in the coming weeks for big news about the next Spirit of the West cruise for 2018. Till next week, I'm Hugh McLennan. Hope to see you down the trail somewhere real soon.